I do remember having a drawer in my desk with a green silverware tray, and my whole collection fit in there at one point.
How many cards would that have been?
Probably like 20 or 30.
And how many do you have now?
42,500 plus. That's the first Matchbox created, the #1 road roller in 1953. And you can see it fit like a matchbox. It even has the striking panel on one side to make it look like it was a box of matches. The word Leslie, England is actually on the inside of the roof. It's the only place that they had to put it. And you'll notice early models, and this one, the axle's pinched on the end, where they're rounded on the other. Early models, they were pinched to secure the axle ends on until they developed riveting machines to smooth the ends over. So this kind of toy wouldn't fly today because it's got sharp edges. I remember having Matchbox back in 1963 because I remember seeing a pocket catalog. So I would have been like 7 years old. Then I joined a collector's club in '69. So by 13, I got hooked as a collector. The first 22 models, when they were issued, never had a number on the bottom. It wasn't until the number 23, the Berkeley Cavalier trailer, that the first model actually got a number on them. And then when some of the second versions of some of the other models came into being, then they started having a number.
So what is the difference between them?
Wheels, windows, window color, clear window, green window, no window. Silver wheel, gray wheel, and black wheel. Well, at 13, I saw a blister card that said, join the Matchbox Collectors Club. So I said, okay, that sounds like an idea. And I joined that in 1969. Then several years later, I found out about other collectors clubs. And then at some point, I actually started my own club. I started as a chapter of one of the other clubs, a local Connecticut chapter, and then that branched off into a national organization.
How many collectors groups or clubs are there that you know of?
There are thousands, but because of the internet, a lot of them are not documented through clubs anymore. I'm probably the last remaining club that publishes a monthly newsletter. At its height, we got up to 1,500 members. We're down to under 300 because people just don't like to have paper anymore for a newsletter. The second model made and released at Christmas 1953 was the small little dump truck. It actually had a moving feature. To round out the Christmas release of 1953 was the #3 cement mixer. It was just something that they would use at a construction site over in England. Well, I decided by 1992, I said, I think I'm gonna have a museum. And I had spread out into, I think, 2 rooms upstairs. And then I got into the basement, refurbished it. I probably had 10,000 models at the time. My mother and father were still both alive, and they basically put up with me. They let me overtake the house with the toys, and they lived around it. I remember being obsessed with them growing up. You know, I got to a point where if we took a family trip, my toys had to go with me.
So how popular were Matchboxes?
Well, if you go back into the mid to late 1960s, they were cranking out 1 million models a week out of the factory during the regular wheel era.
What are you calling them again?
They're called regular wheels.
Regular wheels.
And nobody knows where that came from because Matchbox did not call them regular wheels. They got that term sometime in '69 when Superfast came out, and somebody just called them regular. Matchbox actually started as a company called Lesney Products in 1947 by 2 unrelated Smith brothers. This is a picture of the Rifleman Pub. This is the original business building that Lesney Products bought back in 1947 to start the Lesney Products Company. This is one of the original founders of Lesney Products. He's the LES in Lesney. It's Leslie Smith. This is Jack Odell. He's the tool maker that Leslie and Rodney Smith hired. He's the one more well-known than the Rodney Smith as the founder of Lesney. They called their company Products because they weren't sure what they were going to make. They were making all different kind of tools and dies before they were looking to make toys. In fact, I got to meet Leslie Smith years ago before he passed on and asked him, what's the first item your company ever made? And he said, windshield wipers. In 1953, they decided that they were going to make a small coronation coach, which was their first miniature for the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. They sold 1 million units of these and was the basis for them starting the Matchbox line when they started making a very small toy compared to the larger toys made previously.
So this more or less was the very first Matchbox.
Without being called a Matchbox. Jack Odell, his daughter actually, said, Dad, I need something for show and tell. So he made a brass prototype road roller and gave it to her to bring to school for show and tell. And he says, oh, that'll fit in a Matchbox. Hey, that's a good idea for a toy. And that's how they came up with Matchbox. They actually used a Czechoslovakian Matchbox design to design their boxes as well. And they used a company called Moko. As you'll see on some of the early boxes, Moko was what they called a toy factor, which helped distribute Matchbox. When I grew up, they were 49 cents. They kept adding to the line till it grew to 75 by 1960, and that was their cutoff point. And they said, well, now it's time to retire some of the toys, so they started replacing models. Sometimes they would upgrade, say a road roller, make it bigger and make it bigger, but keep it number 1. When they did the number 5 London bus, first one in 1954, was the smaller one. Instead of when they discontinued it, they upgraded the size, and they upgraded the size again, and by mid to late 60s, they upgraded it for a final time into a larger size. Well, as every model was discontinued, another model would replace it. So the number 3 would be the cement mixer when it was discontinued, become a Bedford tipper. When that got discontinued, it became the Mercedes ambulance until that got discontinued, and then the superfast range took over. They ran into some financial issues in 1969 when Hot Wheels started coming out. And in 69, they had to revamp their entire lineup to superfast wheels. And that was able to keep them in competition with Mattel with their Hot Wheels. The green Land Rover and the blue Land Rover in the Superfast series. The blue one is considered a transitional, meaning it's the same color as the regular wheel model, so they would both be blue. And because Lesney would not throw parts away, there'd be extra bodies laying around, they were assembled with the Superfast wheels. The green one is throwing us off in the sequence because the body should not have been available at that particular time. The mint green Lincoln, same story as the Land Rover. That is a transitional color. Same color as the regular wheel. The mint green Lincoln is probably the rarest of all the transitional Superfast. It can range anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 depending on where you buy it. The one below it is the standard issue, which would be like $25, $30.
How many of those exist
Mint green Lincoln, I know of probably less than 10 floating around, and the Land Rover is probably less than 20. By 1982, they got really into financial problems, and they ended up going bankrupt. They ended up having to go into receivership, and a company owned by David Ye in Hong Kong, who owned Universal Toys, bought them out and renamed the company Matchbox International. He kept it till 1992 when Tyco Toys bought them out. And then by 1996, Mattel, who was their one that almost killed them off in 1969, bought them out in 1996, and Mattel has owned them to this day. Pocket Catalog started in 1957. They produced one every year as a collector's guide. They would even give you check-off boxes so you could check off your collection. They did that through 2010 when they just made a marketing decision not to do it anymore.
What is your holy grail?
It would be a soapbox racer. This is a copy of the soapbox racer that was made in 1948. It is the only model in my collection that I do not have a die-cast representation of that was made by Matchbox Toys from 1947 to current. And there's less than 20 surviving examples, so it makes it extremely expensive to purchase one if one becomes available. When this model was first introduced in 1982, it was called the number 38. It's the Model A van. There are more variations of this model by Matchbox than any other. There's over 800 recorded variations. I probably got 500, 600, 700 of those. They got to a point where they didn't want to make 10 and 20,000 piece promotional runs. So they got in touch with two companies, one called ASAP and a company called Color Comp. And you could contact them and they would produce small runs like 50, 100, 500. That was a series that I did on my own. I came up with an idea. It took about 2 years to get it developed. And I just wrote down different headlines that I think would represent 6 very well-known headlines over the last 40 years.
And how many of each of those were made?
I made 40 sets. These are the king-size models that first were introduced in 1960. These are the ones that were produced through 1969 before they went through to the superfast wheels. One of my favorite items is collecting pre-productions. These are all pattern models. That one there is a Lotus Elise. Back a long time ago, before they were even doing resin, if you had a different model maker, sometimes you would use a different substance. In this case, they use modeling clay, and they kept squashing the model down, fit it in the box. And so the model is a lot sleeker than what it actually was. It's a Cougar Villager. And back probably 30 years ago, I think I paid $400 for that. Right now, that's priceless, because I've never seen another one. Before they did resin models, they carved things out of wood. And this one was just to give the general shape of the model. And as you can see, there's a silhouette that is actually applied with masking tape. These models are all errors, and they have like a wrong wheel, missing print, damaged assembly, missing parts, and it makes them an error. And they're only worth what you want to pay for them. To find a smash model in a package. I'm not really sure why I got obsessed the way I did, because when you think of Matchbox toy obsession, you think of just little cars. But when I got obsessed with everything Matchbox. I got into the dolls, the games, the plastic kits, anything Matchbox branded, and I just got carried away. These two models are not original factory-made models. If they were, these would be two of the rarest Matchbox you could ever own. The mint green crane came in a gift set. There's probably less than 5 anybody can tally. We're thinking it's worth at least $10,000 to $15,000 for a real one. The tan crane, my original one, had an orange boom. They came orange boom and red boom. I sold mine back 20 years ago on eBay for $10,000. Well, it got real bad around 2000 when I started parting stuff out. And then within a couple years, it's like everything that's shown behind me had to go. And I kept like 80 pieces from 1969, and everything else went for $25,000, what was left, to pay the bills and to pay the mortgage on the house, because the mortgage was really high at that time. And I've slowly built it back up. I had 900 pieces at one time. I've got it back up to 600 on the regular wheels. I fund collecting through the money I make at work or through my collector's club, or I sell on eBay, and then I use that to fund back some of my toys.
What do you think overall the collection's worth?
Well, if I hadn't sold some of the stuff 20 years ago, which was all the rarest stuff, it would have been $1 million collection. Probably now it's worth at least $500,000. This is the Encyclopedia Matchbox Toys. It covers all models made from 1947 when they first started to 2001 at the time. It starts off with a history, and then it goes into the different series, shows the different wheels, shows at least one of each casting that was produced, starting off with the regular wheels. We'll go into super fast.
Now, how many books have you written?
I've done probably about 8 or 9, not including different edition upgrades. Condition is everything to a collector. It's got to be mint or very close to it, including the box. Although I do have a few pieces in my collection that are chipped, only because it's the only way I could find it, because it's maybe so rare. I find that being an eBay seller, selling stuff with a box and without a box, sometimes you can get 50% or better by throwing that box in with the model when it's for sale. Although there are a lot of people saying, I don't need a box, I'm collecting the models.
Are there any cases where the box itself is worth more than the car?
Absolutely. It's a number 22 Pontiac. The box itself, it's one that has a blue square in the corner. It's a $2,000 box for a $25 model. And it was just a real short production run, and then the model changed to super fast. Just for little variations. This one's got a patent number, this one does not. So that tells you how intricate of a detail a collector will go.
Are you still actively purchasing them?
Absolutely. I'll go into Walmart and I get thrilled just finding $1 new car on the rack. Always looking on eBay, always finding something I'm going to need.
What's your favorite new car that Matchbox has put out?
There's like a 1941 Cadillac, which a lot of people may not appreciate, being something dated from the 1940s, but it's one of my favorite new ones that came out in 2020.
There's a smile for every mile at the SO sign.
I grew up with them. I just love little cars. I love the variety. And Matchbox were cheap. Parents bought them for me. And I just spent hours and hours just playing with them as a child. And it grew into a passion. It occupies my mind. It keeps me busy. It has kept me focused and grounded. And it never stopped. Most of my friends are all Matchbox collectors. You know, I'll be 65 soon, and you're probably gonna have to pry them out of my hands when I go. Just hard to describe, you know, what fuels me.
Could you ever have too many?
Never. I'm running out of space, but I'll never have too many.